So we may not have blue skies and sunshine, but it probably befits this destination very well. We are in Auschwitz in Poland, and wow, is there some history here. Opened in 1947, the museum and memorial encompasses the sites of the former Auschwitz. Sorry if the pronunciation's incorrect. What makes this exceptional is the fact that it was the largest extermination, centre, and is the only camp to be preserved to such an extent in its original condition. Located here are grounds containing human ashes, ruins of gas chambers and crematoria, the places where SS doctors carried out selection, the roads leading to the gas chambers, and the places where Jewish families awaited death, and execution sites. The basic elements of the Nazi German ideology were of hatred of democracy, communism, and Jews, combined with the belief that German people were superior to others. This is human hair, and I know it's not a very good shot, but hair of women murdered in the gas chambers weighing approximately 1.950 kilograms. Victims' hair was sold by the SS as a raw material for the German textile industry at a cost of 50 pfennigs per kilogram. And there is, just to give you some idea, encased in a cabinet all the way. Absolutely incredible. So after they arrived, the injured, the sick, wives, children were deemed to be either suitable for labour or not. Those that weren't were disposed of. So this is actually a really sad collection of items that were to them suitcases belonging to Jews deported to the camp. And when I say there's a few, and then the adults, more and more, but wait, and more. This is the death wall where people were shot as a method of execution. To the right side of this door in block 11, the condemned were led out to die. The windows of the cells of the upstairs rooms were constructed in such a way that the inmates there could not see the executions. The SS shot more than 5,000 people, mostly prisoners sentenced to death by a German summary court or prisoners confined, to block 11 at the so-called death wall in the walled-off yard between blocks 10 and 11. The numbers of prisoners brought straight from the camp for execution and of Soviet POWs and the Poles brought from outside the camp are not known. Number, date, departed, destination.
Oh, jeez.
My goodness. You are, this takes in, you are but a number. So today we've come to Birkenau camp. It's the largest centre for the extermination of Jews. The first two provisional gas chambers began functioning near the camp in the first half of 1942 as part of the Nazi plan for the final solution of the Jewish question. A year later, the Germans put 4 larger gas chambers with crematoria into operation inside the camp. It's the largest Nazi German concentration camp for prisoners of various nationalities. In the summer of 1944, at the peak of the transports of Jews from Hungary and occupied Poland, there were 90,000 prisoners in Birkenau.
Sad.
The gate through which the trains carrying Jews to destruction arrived from mid-May 1944 also served as the SS guardhouse. The train stopped at the ramp or unloading platform that was the central point in the camp. In the foreground, to the right of the wooden barracks known as quarantine, and on the left a brick barracks, segment B1, along the barbed wire fence is a row of wooden guard towers, which you can clearly see. The limited access to sanitary facilities and overcrowding led to a plague of lice and rats. Epidemics of infectious diseases frequently broke out in the camp. The wooden barracks are designed for 400 people, windowless, the light reaching the interior only through the skylights in the roof. Designed for 400 people, windowless, with light reaching the interior only through the skylights in the roof. Each of the 18 stalls, there was either a 3-tier bunk bed or a 3-tier sleeping platform designated for 15 prisoners. The prisoners slept on straw mats. They had blankets to cover themselves, and the heating system consisted of 2 stoves connected by a chimney shaft running the entire length. The size of the interior and the insufficient insulation made this system ineffective. Around the Birkenau camp, between the guard towers, air raid shelters for the sentries can be seen. They were built in 1944, when Auschwitz camp came within range of American bombers flying from air bases in Italy, despite the fact that the Polish resistance movement had passed on reports about the existence of the gas chambers. They never became a target for Allied bombers. However, American air forces carried out several raids on the IG Farben chemical plant located 7 km from Auschwitz. Some bombs exploded far from the factory. There were fatalities among both prisoners and the SS on the grounds of camps in the Auschwitz complex. To try and give you an idea of the scale is so difficult. I mean, It's huge. I believe it's actually over 432 acres. Just incredible. On October 7, 1944, members of Sonderkommando, the special detachment of Jewish prisoners who were forced to empty the gas chambers after a mass gassing and undertake the burning of the corpses, organised the only armed revolt that ever took place at Auschwitz. They succeeded in destroying gas chambers and crematorium for more than 450 heroic prisoners who took part in the revolt were murdered by the SS either during the revolt itself or subsequently for the purpose of retaliation. The forest that you can see over behind us there, many prisoners who were brought here because the gas chambers were too full were all just led to wait under the canopy of the trees in the forest for their turn in the gas chambers. Women, children, men.
Well, still within the confines of the Auschwitz fence.
The main camp bathhouse, also known as the sauna, housed equipment for disinfecting clothing. It's located in the vicinity of gas chambers and crematoria 4 and 5, and immediately adjacent to the warehouses where the Germans collect property looted from the victims. From December 1943, the sauna functioned first of all as the building for the reception and registration of arrivals. Tens of thousands of prisoners, mostly Jews, but also Poles and others, passed through. Their personal belongings were confiscated, their hair was cut off, they were disinfected and bathed, and they were given camp numbers and uniforms. Jews were sometimes subjected to a second selection here. Those regarded as incapable of labour, especially pregnant women, were sent to the nearby gas chambers. It is possible to learn about the history of the buildings by walking through the rooms in the same order as prisoners were forced to do. Newly arrived prisoners had to undress in this room. Clothing, valuables and documents belonging to non-Jewish prisoners were taken for deposit in the camp storage rooms. Property belonging to Jews, whether they were murdered on arrival or assigned to labour in camp, was confiscated and taken to the nearby warehouse area known as Canada. After sorting and disinfection, it was shipped to various destinations in Germany, mainly for the use of German civilians. In this room, prisoners assigned to the Canada Commando searched clothing and luggage confiscated from Jewish victims who had arrived at the camp. They were looking for hidden valuables and money. Once the search was completed, the clothes were disinfected in the sauna and then stored in the Canada before being sent to Germany for reuse, mostly by civilians. Currency and valuables were held by a special branch of the camp administration before being sent on elsewhere, including to the Reichsbank in Berlin. Naked prisoners were herded along this corridor to the showers and disinfection. Clothing confiscated from Jewish victims or taken from prisoners during the sporadic camp delousing operations was disinfected in the chambers and autoclaves visible to the right. In order to make prisoners conspicuous and to prevent escape, all their hair was cut off. This is the room where the camp barbers cut and shaved all the hair from the bodies of the male and the female prisoners. They did so with blunt instruments and at great speed, so prisoners were often injured. The procedure was particularly humiliating for women, since the barbers were often men and they were shaved in the presence of jeering SS men. The tattooing of several numbers assigned to prisoners as part of the registration procedure was sometimes done here. The numbers replaced their names. Obviously it's been made duck. It's been made to look a lot nicer than what it would have at that time. But showers, obviously the disinfecting process. Prisoners showered and were disinfected in this room. They were frequently harassed in various ways. Several hundred people at a time were crowded in here. Water that was usually ice cold or scalding hot poured onto them from the shower heads in the ceiling. Prisoners usually received neither soap nor towels. After the shower, they went to the next room where they were supposed to dry off. Prisoners were assembled in this room after their shower, naked and wet, standing or sitting on the concrete floor and exposed to drafts. They waited as long as several hours for the distribution of special camp clothing. Eventually, they were driven down the corridor to the room where they were given camp clothes. Prisoners operated the equipment in which the clothing was disinfected by means of steam. These chambers had hot air circulating them, and they would hang coat hangers of coats and everything along the top rails and have hot air go around them for disinfecting. In this room, prisoners received their striped camp uniform and wooden clogs. When increased numbers of arriving prisoners caused shortages of striped uniforms, prisoners received worn-out clothing and shoes from the Canada warehouses. Dressed in ill-fitting clothing and shorn of their hair, prisoners were often unrecognisable even to close relatives or friends. Frightened and terrorised by the procedures associated with induction into camp and full of anxiety over the fate of members of their families, they were sent off to barracks to begin the hopeless existence of people fated to a slow death in the concentration camp. The gas changer and crematorium 3, where several 100,000 Jewish men, women, children were murdered by gas and their bodies burned. The crematorium was also used for the disposal of bodies of prisoners of the concentration camp, both Jews and non-Jews, who had died from other causes. The gas chamber and crematorium 3 operated from June 43 to November 44. Towards the end of the war, the SS began to remove the evidence of the atrocities committed at Auschwitz, and in November 1944 the installation was dismantled. On January 20, 1945, dynamite was used to destroy what remained. The monument commemorating the victims of Auschwitz was erected on the grounds of the former Birkenau camp in 1967. Physically and symbolically, the monument marks the end of the road that during the war led to the gas chambers. There are plaques on the monument with texts in the principal languages spoken by the deportees to Auschwitz. The Birkenau barracks, the brick barracks, were designed for 700 people, containing 60 three-tier bunks. Each of the 180 sleeping places had a nominal capacity of 4 persons, in practice 6 or 7. The prisoners slept on straw scattered on the boards of the bunks, without pillows. In periods when the barracks were overcrowded, several people shared a single blanket. Small stoves served to heat the interior but were insufficient to produce the required amount of heat. The construction of the first 30 brick barracks began in autumn of 41. Bricks from nearby farmhouses, demolished after the expulsion of their Polish owners, were used. From the spring of 1942, wooden barracks, German field stables, shipped to Birkenau in the form of prefabricated components, also began to be erected in segment B1. Men were placed in the first segment, B1B, in March of 1942. And the women in the second segment, B1A, from August 1942. The railroad siding, known as the Juden ramp, was the main place where transporters dispatched to Auschwitz arrived in the years 1942 to 1944. The Germans brought more than 500,000 Jews here from occupied Europe in transports, as well as tens of thousands of Poles, Roma and others. The horror that happened here, I don't think anyone can possibly try to say that they understand, or that the reasons behind were justifiable. But history is just that, history. Let's hope we don't see something of this ridiculous size and behaviour again. But it is a very interesting day to spend between Auschwitz 1 and 2 and understand the history of what happened and maybe have some compassion for all those that were affected by this atrocity.